The Joining the Dots podcast focuses on the many challenges facing education and how different approaches and innovations are needed to meet those challenges.
Join co-hosts Matt Jessup and Elle Kingsley as they have discussions with innovative educators, business leaders, policymakers, and other stakeholders, and guests looking at transforming the future of education.
Never a good start when the host and the guest are laughing at the introductory tune, I don't think. Morning, Hugh. I'm just trying to think how to introduce you, Hugh. I follow a lot of things on LinkedIn. I've got a real interest in hybrid and online schools, and I have to say that from speaking to a lot of people, you and what Minerva doing are jumping out at me and a lot of people as sort of the market leading option. And as a firm believer in the future of schooling being hybrid, I'm very, very interested in finding out how you're doing what you're doing, how you're excelling at it, and first of all, why you started it.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks for having me, Matt and Al. How did it start? I mean, it's not that long ago. It's 4.5 years ago, really. A bit less than that. So just over 4 years, we launched. In January 2021, we opened our school gates with 4 students. And I say gates, obviously metaphorically, being an online school. But we opened our school gates with 4 students, 4 early adopters in January 2021. And yeah, just over 4 years later, we have over 1,100 students at the school full-time. That's 1,100 students full-time at MVA across year 7 to year 13. And the reason I say full-time is understandably, people assume an online school is a part-time option, maybe a course, an app. You know, people can't get their head around that it is actually school. It's school in every sense of the word. School, like you two would understand school, and like your listeners would understand school. We have assembly on Monday morning with the principal. We have year group assemblies on Wednesdays in the different year groups across year 7 to year 13. We have after-school clubs. We've got over 30 after-school clubs now. Typical ones like baking and art and photography, and then ones like Entrepreneur Club, Neurodiversity Society. Clubs like any good school should have. We have pastoral care. We have a vice principal pastoral with a massive pastoral team, including our mentors, because every child receives mentoring once a week, and a vice principal academic with an academic team, heads of department, and a faculty now of over 150 on the payroll, and all of that's tied together, really with a sense of community that you would get at a good traditional school. So 6 school trips a term in person and everything else. So when I say school and full-time enrolled, I mean full-time enrolled. We are not a course. We are not an app. We're not some online provider. We are a school first and foremost. And when we launched in January 2021, that was our model then. We just had 4 students, right? The model then for a mixture of asynchronous and synchronous learning, which I'm sure we'll dig into, the model for having every child having a mentor, one-on-one, once a week. It was once a fortnight back then, so it's got better. And the idea of our community was the same when we launched with 4 kids as it is now with over 1,100. We launched, I think you asked why.
Yeah.
Because of the need for an alternative form of schooling. Not an alternative form of learning, which we are, but an alternative form of schooling for children whom school does not suit at best, or school makes them ill at worst. And those 4 founding students were the 4 groups we intended to serve from day one. The reason we launched, because we believe all children should be happy in school. All children should go to a school that suits them. And those 4 categories of students, those 4 founding kids, were the 4 different categories we serve now with 1,100. Like the founding 4 kids. So the first is families for whom traditional school is too constrictive with their life, perhaps because of their parents' job, perhaps because of their situation, meaning they move around a lot, or they're just a bit forward thinking and don't like to be, in a classroom for 8 hours a day. They want to be outdoors more. And conversely, going to online school means you can be outdoors more because you get your work done in the morning and get outside more. And that's the type of family we served. And one of our first kids was just like that. The second was a young athlete, and we serve a growing number of athletes and performers. There's nearly 200 full-time at the school now, elite young athletes and performers. When I say performers, the athletes are the obvious one: tennis players, motor racers, golfers, swimmers. But the performers we're getting more and more dancers, actors, etc. One of our founding four, which we invented to serve, was an athlete. The next category was one child was a neurodivergent child whose neurodivergent needs meant they couldn't attend physical traditional school, and the parent came to us. That is now that type of child now makes up 25% of all our students, so over 250. And the final was a child whose mental health needs, anxiety, but it can vary, but it's mostly anxiety, meant she couldn't attend her traditional physical school, and she came to us. Her name was May. And the most wonderful thing about May was she did 2 years with us, year 10, 11, got her GCSEs. It's our first ever student. By the time she left, there's about 250 kids at the school, and she was the first ever student. So imagine that, faith. And she left, went back to sixth form, physical sixth form, because she felt confident enough to do so. She came to us with all manners of anxiety, causing emotionally based school avoidance. She got all her GCSEs, 9s and A's, returned to physical sixth form because her confidence was restored, got A levels, 4 A's, and is now at Oxford reading classics, which is where I applied and got rejected for many years ago. Ended up at a different uni because Oxford rejected me with my classics application. But my first student as an owner of a school ended up at Oxford doing classics. So there's something nice about that story there.
It was ahead of the game, wasn't it? I'm conscious there's now a DFE register of online schools and hybrid schools. I'm not sure if it's the same register. But in terms of barriers when you started it, did people understand what you were trying to start?
Yeah, no. And that was what was so amazing about these four taking a leap of faith. Like, why on earth? They paid fees till the end of the summer term. It was January. Why did they do that? Okay, my previous company, which is still going, I just don't run it anymore, Minerva Tutors, was a well-known, tutoring agency, good reputation, which was well known for its homeschooling services. So we had that as a bit of a protection of faith from these four founding kids and the parents taking a leap of faith on us. We weren't a random new startup out of nowhere. But it took there's a lot of, it's easier now to explain what online schooling is, but back then there was only two kind of existing online schools. They're now both owned by the same school group entity, sort of private equity back, but back then there were sort of two. And then there were other distance learning providers who call themselves online schools, but they're just asynchronous, stuff. So I wouldn't call it an online school myself, but there are two out there. Now there's more. But you're right. It was an unknown, and it's much easier to explain it now, only 4 years later. But the need for it 4 years ago, the desperation, particularly among families in the categories of the mental health, the neurodiversity, and even the athletes and performers, but particularly the neurodiversity, neurodivergent, and the mental health needs. It was so desperate because the situation was so bad and still is bad for the emotionally based school avoidance crisis and the attendance crisis we have, that they're just trying anything. They're happy to try anything, these families, because otherwise their child is utterly miserable and or not even attending school. So desperation caused that demand.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, one of the nice things, I guess, in this context is you're very much preaching to the converted in terms of recognising that we need that diversity of space so that all learners can flourish. There's a natural question. You mentioned it twice in terms of that synchronous, asynchronous, which takes us back to suddenly those terms became the buzzwords during the pandemic and that context of, are we learning online with a human being or are we taking it offline? There's a natural, I think, perception that as soon as you move from the bricks and mortar model of education into anything hybrid, whilst there are ways to preserve the quality of curriculum, there's always some kind of sacrifice in terms of loss of community and children's engagement and opportunities, which kind of misses the point that for some children that space of being in a room with 30 is absolutely not where they're able to flourish and blossom. How do you find that kind of balance between people not considering the idea of a hybrid education as being this black and white zero-sum game between, those two kind of pictures?
Well, there's two kind of answers to that question, which we've been answering since we launched. And one is the simple one, that online school, just being online, creates an environment in which children and possibly learn more. But the second question is, what type of online school are you? Because when we launched, there were online schools that had 8 hours a day of synchronous learning. It's what I call school online. It's just school online. And for me, it's nothing that radical. The radical element is only the fact it's online, but nothing else is radical. And also at the time when we launched, there were online schools which were just distance learning things where you could do maths GCSE completely asynchronously, with some check-in points with a mentor, maybe, or not really a mentor, a sort of tutor every half term. But it's not really school. It's get a GCSE qualification online, but you're not making friends, and you're certainly not getting kind of much attention. Both those models, by the way, are good. Like they're fine, but and sometimes are better than fine and better than what we offer. But right from the get-go, our kind of mission was, can we be what's my best version of online school? What's my best version of online school? What does online schooling mean for the modern world? What does online schooling mean for the future? And for me, it was that mixture of asynchronous and synchronous, because the asynchronous element, which for us is 60% of the academic learning, is asynchronous with us, which is your flexible element with online schooling and homeschooling, which is what a lot of home educators and online schoolers want, the flexible element. But I believe firmly in the power of teachers and good teachers, and being the cornerstone of any school. And that's why 40% of the learning is fixed lessons, live lessons, synchronously, but we operate the flipped learning model. So they learn a topic on the virtual learning asynchronously before they come into the lesson, where the topic is hopefully pre-learned to an extent, where the lesson is interactive and discussive. Then they come off the synchronous lesson where there's only been 20 kids max in the class and go back to the virtual learning platform to consolidate their learning. So that's our academic model. And that was radical. Like, online school wasn't that radical, but that was radical. And the one I was most worried about, risk-wise, to back that up, we did what no other online school did, was give every child a mentor once a week. And that is a person they're matched with from day one. And with an online school, that's amazing, because firstly, the cynical father who's just thinking this is ridiculous, we shouldn't be doing this, but the mum has made them do it because they're so desperate, and the dad's really worried. Like, if that dad gets a mentor report every 2 weeks, updating them on their child's academic progress and their well-being and their involvement in school life, it's like, oh, okay, this is working. So that mentor element, again, was radical, and it worked. And then, like I've mentioned already, we tied that all up with a sense of community, because I didn't want online schooling to mean you didn't make friends. On the contrary, I wanted online schooling to be where they made more friends, because in their physical schools, they're not making any friends. In fact, they've got minus friends because they're bullied so much. With us, they've got friends. And a lot of people with online school in their mind wouldn't think that's possible, but luckily we're proving it is. With that model, those four things together.
That's really powerful. I mean, I've got a list of questions. I saw Matt just about to dive in there. He's going to have, I know from a culture of how he tries to make sure that the curriculum doesn't get in the way, in terms of the national curriculum, in the way of children's development and what they offer and the flexibility of their children's learning journey. I just wanted to flip it for a second before you come perhaps do a bit of a compare and contrast with Matt, which is, does the structure you have with that, 60% being asynchronous, but having that personalized thing, does that actually allow the teachers to do more of what they do best?
100%.
Because that's another angle, isn't it? Recruitment and retention, and how do we actually maximize the real quality, that special human element of great teaching?
Well, the two great crises of our time is the attendance crisis for pupils and the retention crisis for teachers. And we are... for the DFE, who we're trying to get them to listen, because we're showing them, there's loads of things like, we're an amazing model for SEND, please listen, not getting very far. We're an amazing model for mental health needs, not getting that far. Okay, so we're focusing on one issue. We're an amazing model for attendance. Boom, people are listening a bit. Okay, we'll get to SEND eventually and mental health, but attendance, we can help solve the attendance crisis. But with teacher retention, we're proving you only need 40% of the teachers in a school, as you would traditionally. Now, that's scary, I know. We're not trying to sack any teachers. But if you're trying to save costs, if you're trying to balance the teacher retention crisis, if you can see this model, in a physical school where there's 60% asynchronous and 40% synchronous with teachers, oh, hang on, we can make amazing schools without the same budget. And if we're worrying about teacher retention and a budget crisis as well with DFE, surely this is interesting. And just to explain how that's happening, or why it's happening, well, we're not having retention crisis. In fact, we're the opposite. We're getting so many applicants, good quality applicants for the tiniest of roles, well, small roles up to heads of department, up to vice principals. Why are we attracting so many applicants? Well, teachers after COVID got work-life balance envy because all their friends in different professions were now doing work from home. We're now doing sometimes hybrid work, and we're now doing 4-day weeks. And MVA offers 3-day weeks, 4-day weeks, work from home. You never have to come to anything in person, and that's attractive. I think it's not. It doesn't just work because we're an online school. Of course, our model could be replicated in physical schools, traditional schools. Maybe not exactly and not complete copycat, of course. I just mean take inspiration from it. Take inspiration from our model and encouragement. You don't exactly replicate it because there's all sorts of reasons. And let me please always say the caveat. Our model for learning will not suit a lot of kids, but it's the perfect model for some. And again, that will help chip away at the crisis. We're not going to be able to solve it, completely.
I mean, that's my argument about the education system. It's not fit for purpose overall, but it does still meet the needs of about 60% who want that traditional pathway.
Definitely.
Within that 60%, there's probably a good argument that there's a lot of neurodiverse children, for example, that might choose MVA or others if they had that option. I'm just interested in the logistics of international students because you've got a lot of international students here. Is that right? Yeah. So in terms of the traditional school timetable, which something else isn't quite fit for purpose with modern life anymore, how does that fit in with getting everybody, some simple things like getting everybody to attend collective worship?
Really good question. So we've got 20%, 80% of our students are UK based and 20% are rest of world, in about 58 countries, believe it or not. And you think about that, that's only around 250 kids across the 58 countries. Yeah, we've got a lot of countries where there's just one kid. It's a bit of a phenomenon there, a bit of an interesting one. So, but the majority of our rest of world students are in Western Europe. So the time zone isn't that much of a challenge. No, it's plus 1 hour. It's a fair question. They're just coming to school 1 hour later than their UK peers. Where it does become a challenge is in the Middle East, where we've got a few students and growing, where it's 4 hours difference often. And to meet that challenge, we're launching our GST time zone, Middle Eastern time zone this September. I saw that the other week, September. So that is to meet the challenge of the needs of the international students. Because, and being completely honest, that 20% of our international, they miss out on the clubs. They don't miss out on the clubs, They miss out on the school trips.
I was just about to ask about that.
Which is such a big favourite part of them, our model for so many of our kids. And I was just in Malaga last week visiting our Spanish families, where we have the most families outside the UK. And part of this whole 2025 strategy is serving our international community better. So that's the GST time zone in the Middle East. That's like coming out to Malaga to meet our Spanish contingent and basically hopefully offering these school trips in Spain this year and Middle East later this year.
I mean, it must be brilliant for these students to have friends in different countries around the world as well.
That was my dream, Matt, when I launched.
What a thing to have.
The vision was, can online school give you this incredible, in a good traditional private school, a lot of credence is given to the alumni network, right? Why can't this school create a global alumni network of connection? If you've got friends in the Middle East and friends in the Far East even, and friends from Spain, and they do now. Like at first, when we only had 4 kids and 50 kids, that was tough. But post 500 students, sort of between 500 to 1,000, we've reached this amazing mass where these kids are in year 11 and their best friend is in another country, and they only hang out in person maybe twice a year, but they've got this amazing connection. And what's that going to do for their future job prospects and things like that? That's my vision and my belief that the internationalization and the growth of us internationally is just going to be a benefit to these kids.
Globalisation of education is a huge thing,
Culturally as well, not just connections, that's slightly knobby. I don't mean that, but it's true, it's helpful, that global connection post MVA. But culturally, whilst they're at MVA, understanding different cultures. I know this is...
It's kind of huge in the digital world, isn't it?
Yeah, huge in the digital world. And in this kind of post anti-globalisation world,
Yeah.
I think this is it's an antithesis to that, isn't it? But I believe in it, the power of it.
There's a topic of conversation we've had, and probably I shouldn't spend too often sitting thinking if I had the power of God to start all over again. That probably reflects in a very bad way on me. But if you had a blank planet and you were saying we need to deliver a brand new education system, by the nature of geography, you would say, well, I can't possibly put a place of learning and an expert educator within walking or travel distance of every child on the planet. So my starting point would have to be something hybrid that said I want to provide connectivity for every child so they can all access equitable quality of education. And then ideally, I'd create the places and spaces for those children to meet and build community and link that education system in with families. And for me, that kind of translates into many things you're talking about, which is finding a place and space that fits for every child means some children want to be in that space with their peers 7 hours a day. Some children want a different safe space, but there's always that facility to bring them together. And one of the topics we've talked about with a number of guests on this podcast recently has been, the advent of AI. Often there's lots of conversations about what will AI do, but we found it's been the catalyst to say how much more we will value those most human skills and the strengths of the human being. And I think culture and understanding of our peers around the world falls into that. But within that context, when we talk about growing skills, how do you adapt, or how are you adapting your curriculum to make sure that what children are being taught is not the memorization part of the curriculum, but also those broader soft skills, power skills, whatever you want to call them, that kind of employers are now saying that's the secret sauce for our employees?
Yeah, and it started with the beginning when we launched. A lot of education entrepreneurs, ed tech entrepreneurs would say to me, "You're going to rip up the curriculum, right? You're like, GCSEs are dead, A-levels are dead." And I remember just going, whoa, we're already weird enough. If I'm starting to offering a non-GCSE curriculum, people are going to be like, what the hell? So from day one, we offered the English curriculum, GCSEs, IGCSE, so the international GCSE. And then once we got the A-levels going, the IA level, international A-level, mostly through Pearson, EdExcel, and then with Cambridge for A-levels. And again, I'd love to rip up curriculum, guys, like a lot of us education thinkers, but it's such a long game. And we had this it's a long-term game. And I had very much a short-term, the country had short-term needs, which my online school could provide for. And a vision of a different curriculum is something wonderful, but it's too long term for me. So
does it sit on your radar, Hugh, as things you want to try and adapt?
Yeah, totally. But what can we do? I'm sure you guys, you are very familiar with this. Within the scope of the English curriculum, which we have to offer, what can we do around it? Right. Yeah. Now, we have a careers lead, just like any good traditional school, who gets started on career pathways from year 8. So that's amazing. I'm trying to join up those dots, and that's important for every school, I think. Don't just get careers advice when you're about to leave or when you're stressful last year of A-levels or something. Start early. And that is something we do. We have a lot of those after school clubs, and we had cross-curricular projects, a project called World Changers, where outside of the curriculum, kids would do cross-curricular projects, long-term projects with the purpose of changing the world. Now, those are all cool, but they're not exactly groundbreakingly innovative. And I would argue we're not there yet with preparing kids for the world of work style curriculum outside the English curriculum we offer. And we can learn a lot from traditional schools with that. However, one thing I used to be afraid of saying, which I'm not anymore, was the way our kids learn, 60% asynchronously and 40% synchronous, gives them one thing that all children need, all of us need for future life, and that is self-discipline and the ability to work on your own and be a self-starter. And parents used to say to me, that's an amazing thing we're teaching the kids. And I was like, yeah, I'm afraid of saying that publicly. Again, it was it was a bit weird already, and I didn't want to get people from the traditional school system sort of laying into me for that. But now I can really confidently say it. We've got alumni now, and they're all saying this is one of the best skills MVA's taught me. It's like the university model, self-study. And that is an amazing skill for life and discipline for life.
I love that. I mean, there's lots of questions we could kind of unpick. One of the things for me is also thinking about how we look at exemplars, people who are at the front of the curve, trying to look at fresh ways of delivering education. And as you said, there are a number now of virtual offers for parents. The big question, I suppose, is, and I appreciate it's a process probably over quite a few years. Does your model scale to the point where it becomes affordable for all in terms of an education offer?
It's a really great question. So currently at under £9,000 a year, we are seen as attainable private school fees. Now, I know 9,000 a year is a lot. Is a lot for a lot of people, and not affordable.
Compared to some online schools, Hugh, that's nothing.
Yeah, compared to some online schools, absolutely, and compared to private schools, it's obviously way cheaper. So. Yeah. And that's why roughly 70% of our students come from state school backgrounds, which is interesting to know. We've seen that they've been at state school all their lives, and then they could just about afford this £9,000 a year. Cool, so attractive. But what's become really interesting, and I'm not dodging the question, is how big do we need to get before we can reduce the price? Because we may not need to, and I'll tell you why. Last academic year, so 23-24, 16 of our students were dual enrolled, which means they were often emotionally based school avoiders at their state school. The state school gives us a ring and says, we've got a kid for you to come to MVA, and they remain on the roll of their previous state school but are enrolled with us and get their entire schooling with us and stay with us for 2 years often. That was 16 last academic year. That's 100 now. Over 100, it's about 104. 104 students at our school are dual enrolled. And guess who pays that? Their state school. That they pay the fees. And last year, roughly 6 kids were sent to us through local authorities. The local authority says, we've got an emotionally based school avoider. MVA, please, can you help? That is now about 55 this school year. So that's an increase in roughly 500% or something, but more importantly, that shows, so it's 60 kids now. It's going up every week, guys. We recruit new kids. New kids join the school every 4 weeks. So that's one of the reasons we can grow so fast. That's 15% of our students at MVA are state funded. 15% are funded by the state through either a local authority direct referral or a state school, but forward-thinking local authority. A lot of local authorities are not forward-thinking, and a forward-thinking state school gives us a ring and sends the kid to us. And it's worked amazingly. And if we're getting that kind of growth, you're going to get hopefully a nice balance. You're going to get more people having access to our form of schooling where the parents aren't paying. 15% up from like 3% last year.
That's really positive, Hugh, and I can see the kind of thing. I mean, the reason I ask is because there are always lessons to learn, and there's a whole bit about how, in relative terms, cost-effective your offer is, and there's a gap there to what a typical GAG funding is that goes to a school for an individual child. And the question is, the child shouldn't suffer in the sense of we don't want an education provision, virtual or otherwise, that compromises in terms of their opportunities and exposure and trips and cultural understanding. But is there a sense of scale? I mean, in your head, do you look at Minerva and say, well, in 5 years' time, we could be supporting 10,000 children around the world?
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of part of the vision.
10 years' time, 100,000.
Can I link to that?
For 2035 is 100,000 students around the world. Now,
linked to what you're saying there in terms of secondary schools contacting you and some LAs and Department of Treasury might be interested in what you can offer as opposed to Department for Education. But I'm a big believer that the education system has got to move towards sort of voucher-based system. And it has in some countries around the world very successfully. Sweden springs to mind, parts of America. Do you think that the success of Minerva is a reflection of, let me phrase this really carefully and not grumpily, of the lack of pathways that the traditional education system offers, and that a move to a voucher-based system is inevitable?
I think it is inevitable. And the only thing I'm not certain on is, does MVA and others continue to be the only option. I think this is what Al was getting at. Like, is virtual schooling of the quality we're providing always going to remain a private option, basically? Or can there be equivalent for state? And I think before I really know the truth to that question, the answer to that question, my vision has always been this, and this speaks to what you just said, Matt. In 10 years' time, I want to see and can see, I'm confident will happen, a parent having 6 choices for their child, let's say for secondary. A state online school, a state hybrid school, and a state physical school, and then a private option for those 3 as well. And the traditional private school will be just as expensive as they are. The hybrid will be a decent, cheaper, and the online private school will be much cheaper. Now, I think what Al was getting at is hopefully in a utopian vision, there is no private version, and maybe it's all state. I don't know, but I think what we need is choice, and it would be amazing if parents had those 6 choices, because currently most parents have 1. They have 1, right?
Yeah,
it's the physical state school down the road, but to have at least 3 choices for state, an online, a hybrid, and a bricks and mortar would be an amazing.
And a lot of parents don't get their first choice as well, with pressure in certain areas.
Yeah. I think if you come full circle on that, I absolutely support you. I'm not of view that perhaps our current government mitigates, so somehow the best solution is all for one. I think actually choice is what allows our education system to flourish, and much of what we do in some sectors we've learned from the independent sector, and we shouldn't see it as a threat or a competition. It's different choices, and frankly, choice is a healthy thing when done in the right way and equitably. So yeah, I mean, my point was, because I'm always trying to think, as well as, great ideas, the bigger picture is what lessons can we learn from what you're doing that might benefit across the education system at state level, and also not to upset anybody, but if you've got amazing opportunities in the independent sector that provide the right spaces for a certain cohort of learners, why wouldn't we want that to scale to the point where it can cover all children that have that kind of need? Now, again, I think choice is healthy, but I kind of think ultimately it's the measure of success, which is a whole different one about whether we do or don't agree with Ofsted's measure of success. But the measure of success is happy, thriving children that acquire the right skills to give them their choices for future life. Yeah. So there's a little bit, and what you're saying resonates, Matt, doesn't it, with many of the folks we've talked to in the last 10 or 12 episodes.
I do. Listening to Hugh's fascinating, because I do like Minerva. I'm not so big a fan of some other online and virtual schools, but I mean, it's just things like the fact you offer the BTEC in esports, there's so many kids out there. And in terms of jobs of the future, esports is a massive umbrella for jobs of the future.
And from 2026, we'll be offering more BTECs. We want to be the pioneer of BTECs for online schools. Other schools are going to offer IB and do a great job, but we want to go down a BTEC route. I
think what you said and what Al's just mentioned, what interests me is you've got a 10-year plan. Mm. And you see, now I've got a sneaking suspicion you'll probably meet all your targets as well. But the speed of change with AI, I mean, it's amazing what it does. I don't think the human element's ever going to leave it. So I'm in agreement with Al there. And I think, there's lots of questions we could ask about education. I think there's a book out today, Al, that somebody's written that's quite good about asking the difficult questions, isn't it? I'm amazed we've got 40 minutes in and you haven't mentioned the book. But
I'm more interested in what Hugh's got to say.
This is my question.
I'm interested in the book, guys. Come on, tell me more.
Very good. Within your 10-year plan, I mean, you must have a lot of flexibility with your targets and your aims, because the speed of change in terms of technology and how AI can shape things, and the skills that kids from primary upwards, and primary never seems considered for virtual and online, is changing dramatically. So how flexible do you plan?
I agree, Matt. So the background to that plan and that vision is, plan A was get to 1,000 students by January 2025.
You've done it.
We did. And then 2 months ago in February, I thought, oh, right, what about the post-1,000 plan then, Hugh? No, and I'm half joking. As we approached 1,000, there was a plan for 2,000, 2,500. There was. But beyond that, there was, we hadn't sat down and thought about it. So that's something we've been looking at in the last month or so. So I mean, as we approached 1,000, we started making plans for 2,000, 2,500, sure. but it's only once we've hit that 1,000, and the plans are in place for 2,000, 2,500 within a year and a half. In the last month, we've been making the plans for 10 years and 5 years. But there's one thing setting those grand targets and the vision, but really to be disciplined, I never like to look at further than a year. So that's really worked for us. Okay, we had that 4-year plan, but we always brought it back to the year. Always brought it back to the year we were in. And we run the years like annual years, unlike school years, in our kind of marketing and growth plans, which is confusing for everyone. But yes, we run January to December as a business, even though we're a school. But yeah, that's how we did it. The 2020, we set the 2025 January target, and we had the 21 plan, the 22 plan, the 23 and 24. So a bit of context there for the plans.
So, I mean, you've got, all schools have the flexibility for term times and changes whatever they want to, really, but you seem to have a bit more independence. Have you ever considered moving away from the traditional school calendar? Because that school calendar year, financial calendar year, MAC calendar year, it's just a lot of confusing nonsense. But actually, in terms of basic things like summer holidays, actually May and June tend to be the nicest months, and we're always at school. So for your learners and things, is that a consideration ever?
Well, it wasn't, but if you see an announcement on that for 2026, you can take credit for it, Matt.
All right, thanks.
Genius, Matt. Well done.
It's a great idea. I mean, it's a really good idea. And
just
but just for context, it probably didn't cross my mind. A bit like that thing I mentioned about curriculum earlier. We didn't want to be too radical at first because we're weird enough that, like, you know. But as we get confident and more confident in our model, why not just May and June is nice? It's the school holiday prices for flights. Why not reward our families for going to MVA with different summer holidays? You know,
I think it's a no-brainer to me. But I mean, when I floated it to parents, obviously some of them work in schools, other schools, so of course the family impact is huge. But you definitely have that opportunity.
I think my principal will be like Hugh, because I always say these things, and she's got to implement them, and this will definitely be in that. Don't worry, Suzanne. That's it's a long-term vision. That's not for September.
I'm conscious of our timings on our recording, and we've covered lots. I certainly am going to embrace the fact that I love the fact that you think of lots of the things that you're doing are weird. And when we take a step back and think from a common sense perspective, it's like actually some of the things we've been doing for the last 100 years just frankly seem quite weird now. It's the other way around.
I think it's ace what they're doing, Al. I think if you think it's weird, Hugh, be weirder. Because it's needed. It really is needed. And you'll find families in the thousands signing up if they can.
I've never heard it articulated in that way. Thank you, Al. I mean, you're absolutely right. It is weird that we haven't changed school for 200 years, isn't it? It is. That's the weird element. You're absolutely right. I mean, there you go, and that speaks to why we've been successful so far. Touch wood, as long as we remain true to ourselves, we will continue to be successful. We're very grateful for our success, but it's probably because a lot of our parents don't see us as weird; they see us as obvious. Yeah. They see us as obvious after their poor children have suffered so much.
Absolutely. Well, listen, from my point of view, it's been a pleasure. I know it has for Matt because he champions and mentioned you on a number of occasions already.
You,
I may well be reaching out and saying, can I come and have a visit? I'd love to come and find out more about what you're doing.
Stuart. I come too.
Yeah, so field trip. There you go. We're going to do our field trip. Come and see you. But in the meantime, seriously, thank you for sharing. And Matt, any final questions for you or bits?
Have you got any jobs going, Hugh?
Yeah, always. Our biggest challenge is because of the pupil growth and because we take on new pupils every half term. The reason we have in-year recruitment is because kids are suffering mid-term. They need to switch schools and come to us. Meaning we've got to recruit new teachers all the time. So we had 16 new teachers join this term, 16 brand new join this term. About 40 brand new teachers will be joining in September. New.
It was a semi-serious question, only semi-serious. The ratio to be confirmed, but I mean, I spoke to another online group this morning, which I'll speak to you about another time maybe, but their year 8, their ages 12 to 18, your year 7 to 13. I have families at my school who are constantly asking me about flexi schooling and hybrid offers and things like that. Would you ever consider going younger? I mean, I'm conscious that early years is a whole different ball game, but certainly year 4, year 5, year 6.
For me, there's others doing it, and it's not something I've always felt confident with secondary, and I felt I'm yet to be, never say never, but I'm yet to be convinced that pure online, like us, because we're not hybrid, we're pure online, apart from in-person trips. But I'm yet to be convinced that is good for year 6 and down.
That brings me to a next question, Hugh, is that I'll probably see my posts and nobody else looks at them, but I've got this bugbear that my school in the Lake District, gorgeous area, is empty 175 days a year.
Yeah.
And for partnering state schools to get a bit more into the budget and actually providing that facility for social aspects and meetups for hybrid and online schools, why is nobody ever putting those together and thinking, well, we could make this work here?
You're absolutely right. So our vision as MVA in and of itself is to remain an online school. And the hybrid element we will introduce is to have physical hubs around the country where kids can just go and hang out and do their online schooling with us. So the hubs are for socialising, they're for parents to do drop off and obviously there'll be supervision there, but they're not to get their lessons, they're not to get their teaching. They're
it's
for
like
having
co-working spaces, isn't it?
Exactly. That's our vision. Now, I'm a fan of hybrid schools in the future, and the way we can help them is by it's like that's where a traditional school goes hybrid, right? A traditional school says now we have a hybrid version of ourselves for parents. That's not something we'll do. What we will do is create hubs for our own students. But it's the same thing. I love it all. It's just that's the way we're going. We are about to launch, though. This is important. Next week, you'll hear announcements of a new product. Because until now, we've only just had the school MVA, simple. We're launching MVA Hybrid, which is a product for schools, physical schools, to have a hybrid element if they want. So say you're a school that wants to offer psychology A-level and you don't have the teacher. Instead of recruiting the teacher for psychology A-level, your kids can stay at your school, but they can do their psychology A-level with MVA. And we've got the facilities to let them do that, the online facilities. The same with other GCSE subjects that might be a bit different.
Sounds like that fun. If you share the details with Matt and I, we can tag it into the podcast notes when the podcast goes live. Hugh, and just make sure that's shared out as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have a funny feeling we might be inviting you to come back and have a chat with us in a year's time. We'll obviously come see you in the meantime, but I'd love to track what you're doing and see how that for me feels an area where whether we want to talk online or hybrid or that little smudgy bit in between the two, depending on people's particular need and the child, it feels to me that's got to be the future direction of travel in our education system to meet everyone's needs. Or we're just going to spend the rest of our time talking about attendance crisis and why young people don't find it's a place they want to go. And I think on that note, we'll wrap it up and say, Hugh, thank you so much. Pleasure to
brilliant.
Thank you.
Great to hear your journey and what you're doing, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.